After my family abandoned me on Thanksgiving, I canceled the $35,000 trip overnight. The turkey was already in the brine when my father called to tell me not to come. I remember the exact weight of the phone in my hand. My palm still cold from pulling the bird out of the refrigerator, the salt and herbs smell thick on my fingers. I had my grandmother Magnolia's recipe card propped against the backsplash, the index card soft and brown at the corners from 20 years of Thanksgivings, her handwriting in blue ink so faded it looked like it was trying to disappear. I had driven to 3 different stores the day before to find the right fresh rosemary. Not the dried kind. Fresh because Magnolia always said dried rosemary in a brine was a shortcut and shortcuts showed. That was a Wednesday. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Which meant I had been planning this dinner for 11 days. I set the phone down on the counter and looked at the rosemary. My name is Presley Kane. I am 34 years old, and I have lived in Sacramento for 6 years. Long enough to know where the good farmers markets are, long enough to have a standing order at a butcher on Freeport Boulevard, long enough to have built something that genuinely looked like a life. I rent the top half of a duplex in Land Park, 3 blocks from the park itself, with a kitchen that gets afternoon light and enough counter space to actually cook. I work remotely doing project management for a logistics company headquartered in Austin, which means I set my own hours and I have no excuse not to host holidays. My family, my father Wade, my older sister Delilah, my mother Corinne, and my uncle Bo, who had been tagging along to family events since his second divorce, all lived within 90 minutes of me. Wade and Corinne in Elk Grove, 20 minutes south. Delilah in Roseville, 40 minutes northeast. Bo in Folsom, which was practically on the way to anywhere. I had been hosting Thanksgiving at my apartment for 4 years running. 4 years. I want to say that plainly and let it sit for a second because it matters. Not because I expected praise for it. I did not, or I had learned not to. But because it establishes something about the shape of our family dynamic that you need to understand before anything else makes sense. I was the one who hosted. I was the one who planned. I was the one who coordinated the dietary preferences, Delilah's brief vegetarian phase in year 2, Bo's conviction that he was lactose intolerant despite 0 medical evidence, my mother's insistence that the sweet potatoes not have marshmallows because marshmallows were tacky. I bought the good napkins. I ironed them. I set a real table with place cards one year and Wade made a joke about how I was trying too hard, and I smiled and said nothing, and the next year I did place cards again because it was my table and I liked them. This year was supposed to be different in one specific way. I had said it to Delilah in September, during a phone call that lasted 40 minutes longer than expected because she had been complaining about her boyfriend Colton, and I had been half listening while I looked at flights. I told her, this year I want to do something bigger. Not just Thanksgiving dinner. Something we would all remember. What I had planned, what I had already paid for by that Wednesday when my father called, was a 4-night stay at a rented house in Lake Tahoe. Not a cabin. A house. 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a wraparound deck that faced the water, a full chef's kitchen, a hot tub, and a game room in the basement. I had found it in August. I had reserved it in September with a non-refundable deposit of $8,000, and paid the balance in October. $35,200 total, which represented almost exactly 8 months of what I had been setting aside since the previous January. I want to be clear about the money because clarity matters here. The $35,000 came entirely from me. Not from a family fund. Not from a joint account. Not from some arrangement where everyone contributed and I managed it. From me, alone, from savings I had accumulated over 2 years of working more hours than I should have and spending less than I wanted to. I had planned to tell everyone over Thanksgiving dinner that the trip was a gift. Fully paid, no contributions needed, just pack your bags, here are the dates, here is the address, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year rolled into one. I had printed the confirmation documents and put them in a cream-colored envelope with a small card that said for all of us. The envelope was sitting on my kitchen table when my father called. I picked up because I always picked up for Wade. Even when I did not want to. Even after years of learning what his calls often contained. Presley. His voice was the same as always, the particular flatness he used when he had already decided how a conversation was going to go and was simply executing it. Wade Kane was 61 years old, had sold commercial real estate in the Sacramento Valley for 30 years, and had a way of speaking that sounded less like communication and more like documentation. Like he was recording the interaction for a file. "We have been talking, and we have decided we are going to do Thanksgiving at your mother's sister's place in Modesto this year." I did not say anything right away. I looked at the rosemary. "Aunt Patricia's?" I said. "Your mother wants to see her sister. It has been a long time." My mother had seen Aunt Patricia in August. I knew this because I had been present for the visit. A Sunday afternoon at Patricia's house in Modesto, where we had eaten cold cuts and watched a movie my mother chose, and driven home in the early evening with the smell of Patricia's particular cleaning product still in our hair. I did not say this. "I have already started cooking," I said. "The turkey has been in brine since this morning. We figured you would understand." There was something underneath the flatness then, not quite embarrassment, but its cousin. The tone people use when they have already done the thing they are explaining, and the explanation is just a formality. "It is Thanksgiving. Family should be together." The word family landed in a specific way. I set it aside. "Who is going to Modesto?" I asked. "Your mother and I, Delilah and Colton. Bo is coming too. Patricia has the space." "So everyone," I said. It came together quickly. "Presley, you can come if you want, there is probably room." I stood at the counter for a moment and looked at the kitchen I had spent the last 3 days preparing. The good cutting board out and seasoned. The good stock pot on the back burner with the turkey carcass I had been saving from last year's bird, ready to become the base for the gravy. Magnolia's recipe card propped at the backsplash. The fresh rosemary in a glass of water like a small bouquet, the way she had always kept it. "I will not be able to make it to Modesto," I said. My voice stayed level. I recapped the pen I had been using to mark the recipe card and set it down on the counter next to the cutting board. "Okay. Have a good time." There was a pause. I think he expected more resistance or possibly more hurt, some form of visible reaction he could respond to, accommodate, or dismiss. I did not give him one. "You are not upset," he said. It was not quite a question. I did not say that. Another pause. "Well," he said, "we will do Christmas. Maybe come out to Elk Grove this year instead of everyone going to you." "Sure," I said. "I will talk to you later, Dad." I ended the call and stood in my kitchen for a moment without moving. The afternoon light was coming through the window at a low angle, the way it does in November in Sacramento, gold and thin, barely warm. The turkey sat in its pot of brine. The rosemary was dark green against the pale counter. Magnolia's recipe card was still propped against the backsplash, her handwriting fading blue. I counted the pause instead of answering it. The silence in the kitchen after the call, the specific texture of it, the way a person can stand in a room full of things they have done for people who are not there and understand something they have been not understanding for a long time. I had known, abstractly, for years that I occupied a particular position in my family. Not the favored child. That was Delilah, who was prettier and louder and more easily legible to Wade, whose emotional vocabulary ran narrow but deep in the direction of performance. Not the troublesome one. That was a role my family had tried to assign to me in my early 20s when I had moved to Sacramento instead of staying in the greater Sacramento suburbs the way everyone expected, and I had quietly declined the assignment by simply being stable and employed and uninteresting in a crisis. I was the competent one. The one you could count on. Which, I had learned, was family language for the one you do not have to worry about, which was different from the one you think about. I was the one who held things together when they needed holding. I was also, apparently, the one you could exclude from Thanksgiving with a 3-sentence phone call and an expectation of understanding. The envelope on the table caught my eye. Cream-colored, the card tucked inside. "For all of us." I picked it up. I held it for a moment. I turned it over in my hands the way you turn something over when you are trying to understand what it is now that it was not a minute ago. Then I set it back down on the table and went to take the turkey out of the brine. I cooked Thanksgiving anyway. I want to say that not for any dramatic reason, but because the turkey needed to come out and I had bought enough food for 6 people and I did not have anywhere else to be. I cooked the full meal, The turkey, the cornbread dressing, the sweet potatoes without marshmallows because I also thought marshmallows were tacky, the green beans with the smoked almonds, the cranberry relish from scratch, the gravy from the drippings. I set the table for one. I used the good napkins. I did not iron them. While the turkey roasted, I thought about the 9 months that had led to this particular afternoon. The August afternoon, I had found the Tahoe property online and spent 45 minutes on the rental company's website clicking through photographs. The wraparound deck with its view of the water, the stone fireplace in the main living room, the chef's kitchen with its 6-burner range, the hot tub on the lower deck surrounded by pine trees. I had thought about my father standing at that range on Christmas morning making the eggs he always made on holidays, the ones with too much butter that everyone ate anyway because they were his and it was Christmas. I had thought about my mother on that deck with a mug of coffee watching the lake go silver in the morning light. I had thought about Delilah and Colton in one of the upstairs bedrooms and Bo in the game room in the basement, which was exactly the kind of room Bo would occupy for the entire trip and emerge from only for meals. I had thought about all of us in the same house for 4 days, the kind of time together that required actual proximity rather than the managed 2-hour visits we had been doing for years. I had called Rosa at the rental company that same afternoon and put down the $8,000 deposit before I could talk myself out of it. I ate alone at the table in my Land Park apartment while my family drove to Modesto, and I thought about $35,000. The Tahoe trip confirmation was still on my laptop. Printed copies were still in the envelope. I had the rental company's contact information in my phone from the 8 or 9 times I had called them between August and October to add things. A grocery order for arrival day, a request for extra towels, a question about the hot tub maintenance schedule, a request to confirm that the stone fireplace worked and not just for photographs. The woman I had spoken to most often was named Rosa, and she had my credit card on file and the booking under my name. Presley Kane, arrival December 26th, departure December 30th. My family did not know about the trip yet. That had been the plan. Tell them at Thanksgiving dinner, give them the envelope, watch their faces. I had thought about that moment more than I would like to admit. Not because I needed the reaction. Or not only because of that. But because I had been doing things for my family quietly, without announcement, for such a long time that I had wanted, just once, to be in the room when they understood the scale of it. Not the gratitude. I had stopped expecting gratitude in any reliable form years ago. Just the understanding. The moment of comprehension. I see what you did. I see what it cost. I sat at my table with the remains of a Thanksgiving meal I had cooked for myself and thought about that envelope. About my father's voice on the phone. We figured you would understand. About Delilah, who had not called or texted. About my mother, who had said nothing directly and whose silence I was used to reading as agreement with whatever Wade had decided. About Bo, who was not close enough to me to have a responsibility here but who was close enough to have sent a text, at least. Something. My phone showed 0 messages. 0 missed calls. Nothing. I put a lid on the leftover turkey and washed the dishes and left the kitchen clean. Then I sat down at my laptop with a mug of coffee, and I opened the confirmation email for the Tahoe rental. $35,200. Non-refundable deposit of $8,000 already processed. Balance of $27,200 paid in full on October 14th. Booking under my name. Cancellation policy in paragraph 4. Full cancellation of the remaining balance forfeited within 90 days of arrival date, partial credit of up to 40% available for cancellations made more than 30 days prior. December 26th arrival. Today was November 27th. 29 days. I looked at that number for a long time. I picked up my phone. Not to call my family, not yet, not for that. I scrolled to Rosa's number in my contacts and I looked at it for a moment, and then I set the phone face down on the table. 29 days was inside the partial credit window. If I called Rosa tomorrow morning, I could recover 40% of the total, roughly $14,000 back. The remaining $21,000 would be gone. Non-recoverable. An expensive lesson or an expensive decision, depending on which way I was thinking about it. I sat with that for a while. The apartment was quiet. Outside, Sacramento was doing what Sacramento does on Thanksgiving evening. The streets mostly empty, the air smelling faintly of wood smoke from fireplaces, the sky gone dark and clear. I could hear the neighbors downstairs moving around in their kitchen. A car passed on the street below. I thought about the shape of my family. About the way Wade had said family should be together in the same phone call where he told me the family was going somewhere without me. About the envelope on the table, the card with "for all of us" written in my handwriting. About Magnolia's recipe card on the backsplash. About the 4 Thanksgivings I had hosted and the 0 times anyone had said thank you in a way that felt like they meant something bigger than the meal. Here is what I knew: my family did not know about the Tahoe trip. They did not know I had booked it, that I had paid for it, that it existed at all. They knew a trip was being planned in a vague future sense because I had mentioned in passing, once in September, that I was thinking about doing something for the holidays. A trip, maybe. Nothing confirmed. They did not know the envelope on my kitchen table held confirmation documents for a 6-bedroom house on Lake Tahoe's North Shore with their names on the reservation notes. And they did not know that I had, as of 40 minutes ago, started thinking about what it would mean to make a call tomorrow morning. I picked up the coffee mug. It had gone cold while I was sitting there. I drank it anyway because I was still at my table, still in my kitchen, still inside the specific silence of a holiday I had been excluded from, and I was thinking clearly for the first time in a long time. The question was not whether I was hurt. I was. I was not going to pretend otherwise, even just to myself, in a quiet apartment on Thanksgiving night with a clean kitchen and a leftover turkey and an envelope sitting 7 feet away from me. The question was what I was going to do about it. My phone was face down on the table. Outside, a second car passed. Then nothing. Then the sound of the neighbors downstairs laughing at something, muffled through the floor. Whatever had made them laugh, whatever ordinary Thursday evening thing had happened in the apartment below mine, it had nothing to do with me or my family or the $35,000 sitting on my laptop screen in a confirmation email. The world did not adjust for these things. It kept doing what it was doing. I reached over and picked up the phone. I turned it face up. I looked at Rose's number. I want to tell you something about the rosemary because it is the kind of detail that seems small and is not. Magnolia had grown her own. A bush of it in a terracotta pot on the porch of the house in Elk Grove, the old house before the move, which died when we moved and which she had replaced with a new plant in a new pot and placed in the kitchen of the Elk Grove house, and which had died too, eventually, in the particular way rosemary dies when you move it somewhere with less light. She had bought dried rosemary after that. Labeled jars of it in her spice drawer. But she had always said that dried rosemary in a brine was a shortcut and shortcuts showed, and when I found the recipe card after she died, in a box of her things my mother brought to me because she knew I would want it, the card said fresh rosemary underlined twice in Magnolia's emphatic blue ink. I grew my own now. A pot on the balcony of my land park apartment, not quite as large as Magnolia's terracotta pot, but thriving in the Sacramento light in a way it had not thrived anywhere else I had kept one. I cut sprigs from it for the brine. I had been doing this for 2 years, since the second Thanksgiving I hosted, when I first tried the full brine recipe instead of the simpler one I had been using before. The difference was real. Even Wade, who paid attention to food only when it was exceptional, had said the turkey was good that year in a tone that meant he had noticed something. The rosemary was still in its glass of water on the counter when I came back from taking the turkey out of the brine. I stood at the counter and looked at it. The fresh-cut ends were bright where I had trimmed them. I had planned to use the last of it for the brine and then cut more for the dressing, and there was enough for both. I used it for both. The meal happened. I cooked it and ate it alone at the table and washed the dishes and went to bed, and in the morning the rosemary was still on the counter and my family was still in Modesto, and nothing had changed except the shape of what I understood. There is something I want to tell you about the deposit. $8,000, non-refundable, transferred from my savings account to a vacation rental company's account on a Thursday in September. I had sat at this same table in this same kitchen, with the light coming in at the late afternoon angle it was doing now, and I had filled in my credit card number and pressed confirm before I could change my mind. Not because I was afraid I would change my mind about wanting to do it. Because I knew myself well enough to know that I would find reasons to delay. And that delay in my family had a way of becoming cancellation, and I did not want to give myself the exit. The $8,000 was the commitment device. It was me saying to myself, this is happening. You are not going to think about it anymore. You are not going to float it past wait again and wait for the ambiguous response and fold when the response is not what you hoped. You are paying and it is done, and the only question now is when you tell them. I had told myself I would tell them at Thanksgiving. It seemed right. The meal, the table, everyone together, the envelope slid across to my father's place with the card inside. I had imagined it clearly enough that it felt like something that had already happened, or would certainly happen, the way things feel certain in September when December is still theoretical. It had been theoretical, and it had not happened, and the deposit was gone, and the balance had followed it, and $21,000 was a number I would be carrying for a while, and I was sitting in my kitchen alone on Thanksgiving night, deciding whether I agreed with myself about what the number was for. I did agree. That was what I decided, sitting at the table with the cold coffee and the leftover turkey and the cream-colored envelope. I agreed with the decision I had made in September. I just needed to understand what I was going to do with it now. I want to say one more thing about the 4 years of Thanksgiving, and then I will be done saying it for a while. The second year, when Delilah had her vegetarian phase, I had made the lentil dish from scratch. Not from a recipe but from memory, from a dish I had eaten at a friend's place in Sacramento and then reconstructed in my own kitchen over 3 attempts until I had it right. I had tested it in October when I first started planning the menu, and then again in November to make sure. 2 full batches of lentils on weeknight evenings, alone in my kitchen, tasting and adjusting, because I wanted Delilah to have something good to eat, and I wanted to be sure it was good before I served it to anyone. She had 2 servings and said it was good. She had gone back to eating meat by Christmas. I am not telling you this because it is sad. I am telling you this because it is the texture of the thing. The October test batch, the November test batch, the 2 servings, the eating meat by Christmas. This is what performing generosity looked like from the inside. It looked like 2 batches of lentils on weeknights and the texture of being glad that she enjoyed them. Outside in the Sacramento evening, 2 more cars passed in the time it took me to make the decision. I counted them the way you count things when you are not ready to think directly about what you are thinking about. 2 cars. The sound of the neighbor's television through the floor, someone laughing at something. The specific weight of a Tuesday night apartment, the ordinary sounds of ordinary life proceeding in every direction around a table where a person was deciding something that was not ordinary at all. I reached over and picked up the phone. I did not call Rosa that night. I set the phone back down, face up this time so I could see the screen, and I sat at the table until the coffee was fully cold and the neighbors downstairs had gone quiet and the street outside was empty in the particular way streets get empty late on holidays. Not just no traffic but a kind of settled stillness, like the city had exhaled and was not planning to breathe again until morning. Then I went to bed. Not because I had decided anything. Because I was tired in the specific way you get tired when you have spent a day cooking for people who did not show up, and because decisions made after 10 o'clock on Thanksgiving night have a quality to them I have learned not to trust. I want to go back further than yesterday. Not to explain myself, I am past the age of needing to explain myself, but to give you the shape of what I was sitting inside that night because it was not just a cancelled holiday. It was the latest installment of something that had been running for a long time, and the only way the cancellation makes sense is if you understand the account it was drawn from. I started working at 17. Not a summer job, not an after-school thing. I started being the person in my family who worked and contributed in ways that were not acknowledged as work. Wade sold commercial real estate, and the business went through cycles the way real estate always does. When I was 14, there was a bad cycle. When I was 16, there was a worse one. By the time I was 17, we were in a stretch where Wade's commission income had dropped enough that my mother had gone back to part-time bookkeeping work, and the family was making choices about what got paid first. I got a job at a grocery store in Elk Grove. 16 hours a week after school, more in the summers. I am not saying this to establish suffering. I am saying it because of what happened to the money. $200 a month, roughly, at minimum wage with a minor's restricted hours. My understanding was that I would keep half for my own things, school supplies, the occasional social expenditure, and contribute half to the household. This was not a formal arrangement. It was a conversation I had with my mother in the kitchen one evening when she was going through bills, and she had said every little bit helps, and I had said okay, and that had been the entire negotiation. I contributed for 3 years. Not 200 a month, more, as my hours increased and my wages ticked up by small increments. By the time I was 19 and working full hours over the summer, it was closer to $350 a month going into the household account. I was never asked to stop contributing, and I never stopped because I was 17 and then 18 and then 19 and the family needed every little bit, and I was the kind of person who, when told that every little bit helps, believes it and acts accordingly. Wade never acknowledged this. Not once, not in any form. Not a thank you, not a I want you to know I see what you are doing, not even a nod in the direction of the fact that I was a teenager working 16 to 24 hours a week and handing over half my wages to keep the household functioning while he waited for the market to turn. When the market did turn, when things got better, when there was suddenly money again for the things that had been on hold, the vacation to Monterey we had skipped for 2 years, the new refrigerator that had been waiting since the old one started making a sound that meant something bad was coming. None of it was narrated as having anything to do with the stretch we had just come through together. It was just better now. Forward. I left for Sacramento at 22. After 2 years of community college and an online certification program and a job offer I had found myself. Wade's comment when I told him I was leaving was that Sacramento was a city where nobody could afford to live, which was something he had read somewhere and which was not true for someone at my income level and which was, I understood even then, not really about Sacramento. What it was really about, I think, was the specific inconvenience of a person who had been useful to you deciding to become useful somewhere else. My usefulness, in my family, had always been the ambient kind, the kind that is invisible until it is gone. I handled logistics. I remembered things. I was the one who knew what Magnolia needed when she called, the one who drove to Folsom when no one else could make it, the one who tracked the family calendar and made the reservation at the restaurant my parents liked for their anniversary because no one else thought to do it, and it mattered to my mother and I knew it mattered and that was enough reason to do it. These things were not asked of me. They were simply the things I did because I noticed they needed to be done and I had the capacity to do them and no one else was doing them. This is not a complaint. I want to be specific about that. I am not telling you this so you will feel sorry for me. I am telling you this because my father, on a Sunday afternoon several weeks after the Thanksgiving that did not happen, would sit across from me at a kitchen table and tell me that I was performing generosity. That I was keeping score. And I needed to understand by then what the score actually was. The first Thanksgiving I hosted was the year I turned 26. I had the apartment in Land Park by then, the one with the afternoon light and the good counter space, and I invited my parents and Delilah and Bo and I cooked everything. I drove to the butcher on Freeport the Wednesday before and picked up the bird they had been holding for me. I made the cornbread the night before from Magnolia's recipe, the one with the jalapenos and the extra butter that she had been making since before my father was born. I set a real table with the cloth napkins I had bought specifically for the occasion, and I put out candles, and when everyone arrived I had made the kitchen smell the way a kitchen is supposed to smell in November, and I was, for the first time in my adult life, proud of something I had made for other people. Wade arrived 45 minutes late. He said the sweet potatoes were good. Bo drank 4 glasses of wine and fell asleep on my couch before dessert, which was a thing Bo did so reliably that I had started to think of it as his contribution to the event. Delilah helped me with the dishes afterwards and said the apartment was cute in a tone that suggested it was smaller than she had expected, and my mother said thank you and hugged me at the door when they left, and that was the year. The second year was essentially the same, except Wade arrived on time and Delilah had entered her vegetarian phase, and I had made a lentil dish alongside the turkey so she would have something substantial to eat, and she ate 2 servings and said it was good, and that was its own form of acknowledgement. The third year Wade arrived on time but spent most of dinner on his phone because he was tracking a deal. Not an emergency. He told us about it, a property in Elk Grove that was finally closing after 6 months of complications, and he needed to be available in case the title company called. I had made Magnolia's turkey brine recipe for the first time that year, driving to 2 stores to find the fresh rosemary, and the bird had been the best I had ever made. Wade ate it while scrolling through his phone. I watched him eat and thought, this is not something I will remember bitterly. And I was right. I do not remember it bitterly. I remember it accurately. The 4th year, last year, Delilah brought Colton for the first time and he was fine, genuinely fine, perfectly pleasant. He complimented the cornbread. He asked Bo about Bo's work, which was a thing almost no one did, and Bo perked up in a way I had not seen before. And I remember thinking this is the best Thanksgiving we have had in years, which tells you something about the baseline. This was the 5th year, and it had not happened. I slept badly that night. I woke up at 5:40 and lay in the dark for 20 minutes listening to the neighbor's dog bark twice and then stop. By 6:15 I was at the kitchen table with fresh coffee and my laptop open, and the confirmation email for the Tahoe rental was still there on the screen where I had left it. The December light was starting in the window. Thin, gray, the particular quality of Sacramento in late November when the leaves are mostly gone and the sky is the color of old concrete. I had a full refrigerator of leftover food and nowhere to be and nothing to do except decide something I had already mostly decided. I read the cancellation policy again. Then I opened a new browser tab and looked up the rental company's customer service hours. They opened at 8. Between 6:15 and 8 o'clock I did not call my family. I did not text Delilah. I did not send my mother a message asking how Modesto had been. I drank 2 cups of coffee and I made myself a plate of leftover turkey and cornbread dressing. Cold because I did not bother heating it, and I ate breakfast at 6:30 in the morning the day after Thanksgiving because I had a full refrigerator and nowhere to be, and while I ate I looked at the cream-colored envelope on the table. I had put the envelope there in September, the day after I paid the deposit. I had printed the initial confirmation, folded it, and slid it into the envelope along with the card I had written. For all of us, in the blue ink that I associated with Magnolia because she had always used blue ink, an old fountain pen she had carried since the 1960s that left ink slightly thicker on the downstrokes. I had sealed the envelope and put it on the table and left it there as a kind of anchor. A reminder of what the money was for. What the planning was building toward. It had been on my kitchen table for 2 months. I had moved it to set the table for dinner. I had moved it to use the table for work. It had been on the table when my father called yesterday, the cream-colored corner of it visible past the pot of rosemary brine, and I had looked at it while he talked and said nothing about it. At 7:58 my phone rang. Not Rosa. Not the rental company. Delilah. I looked at her name on the screen for 2 full rings. Then I picked up. Hey, she said. She had the voice she used when she was calling to perform something rather than say it. Slightly elevated, warm in a way that had effort behind it. How was your Thanksgiving? Did you end up cooking? I did, I said. That is so sad, Presley. She said it lightly, the way you say something light when you want it to land heavy enough to demonstrate sympathy without actually costing you anything. You should have just come to Modesto. Patricia had tons of food. Dad said there might be room, I said. I had things here I needed to take care of. Well. A pause. The sound of her moving around. I could hear Colton's voice somewhere in the background, the low murmur of a television. Listen, the reason I am calling. Dad mentioned you were planning some kind of trip for the holidays? Like a group thing? My hand around the coffee mug stayed still. He mentioned that, I said. Because Colton and I were talking, and we actually already made plans for Christmas week. We are going to his family in Phoenix. So if you were thinking of doing something that week, it is not going to work for us. She said it the way someone says something they have rehearsed just enough to sound unrehearsed. Matter of fact. Preemptive. I just wanted to let you know before you got too far into planning. I appreciate you telling me, I said. Is it a big thing? Like, what were you thinking? I have not finalized anything, I said. My voice was even. I set the mug down on the table without making noise. Still working out the details. Okay, well, just do not book anything without checking with everyone first. Last time you planned that Tahoe thing for New Year's and it did not work with Dad's schedule and everyone felt bad. She meant 3 years ago, a weekend trip I had proposed and built a whole itinerary around. A rental cabin in Tahoe, New Year's Eve, enough room for everyone, restaurants I had looked up, a list of activities I had put together in a document I had shared with the family. Wade had declined because of a real estate conference, and then the trip had not happened, and somehow in the retelling it had become a planning failure on my part rather than a scheduling conflict on his. I remembered how the document had felt, all that specificity, all those hours of looking things up and thinking about what each person would want. I remembered sharing it and watching it go unanswered for a week before Wade called to say it did not work. I remembered quietly deleting the shared document because there was no longer any reason to keep it open. I remembered it clearly. Apparently, it had been filed differently in the family archive. I will keep that in mind, I said. Okay. Good. Another pause. Well, I hope you had a nice Thanksgiving, even if it was just you. Did you at least do a turkey? Full spread, I said. You are insane, she said, warmly, the way you say something warm when you mean it as a diminishment. Okay, I will let you go. Talk soon. She hung up before I could say anything else. I sat with the phone in my hand and looked at the envelope on the table. Then I looked at the clock on the laptop. 7:59. I thought about what she had said. Do not book anything without checking with everyone first. The assumption underneath it, that I was somewhere in the early stages of an idea, that nothing had been decided, that I was a person who proposed trips and needed to be managed. The assumption that I was still in the position I had always occupied. The one who planned, the one who accommodated, the one who adjusted when other people's schedules turned out to matter more than whatever she had organized. The one who made the document and quietly deleted it when the document became unnecessary. Colton's family in Phoenix. At 8 o'clock exactly I called Rosa. Rosa answered on the second ring. She had a warm, professional voice that I had come to associate with competence and reliability over the months we had been in contact. 8 or 9 phone calls, most of them initiated by me, all of them about details. A grocery delivery order for the arrival day, a question about whether the fireplace flue had been recently inspected, a request for extra blankets in the upstairs bedrooms because Corinne ran cold and I had been thinking about her comfort in the house before she knew the house existed. Presley, hi. Happy day after Thanksgiving. What can I do for you? I reached into the folder I had printed in October and pulled out the booking confirmation. I had the document in front of me. The full 4 pages, the itemized breakdown, the cancellation policy in paragraph 4, the arrival details for December 26th. I laid it flat on the table next to the cream-colored envelope. I need to ask about the cancellation process for the Tahoe reservation, I said. The booking under Kane, December 26th through the 30th. A brief pause. Not a long one. Rosa was professional, but enough that I knew she was pulling up the file. Of course. Let me get that in front of me. The sound of keyboard clicks. Okay, I have it here. 6-bedroom North Shore property, full rental. You are currently at 29 days out from arrival. Based on our cancellation policy, you would be in the partial credit window, 40% of the total balance refunded to your original payment method. That would be approximately $14,080 back. The remaining amount would be released to us as the cancellation fee. $21,120, I said. That is correct, she said. Gently. She had a good instinct for when a customer needed the number confirmed without commentary. And if I cancel today, how long does the credit take to process? Typically 5 to 7 business days. With the holiday weekend it might be closer to 7 to 10, but we do expedite when we can. I would like to cancel, I said. Today. Another pause, longer this time. Of course. I do want to make sure you have all the information. Once the cancellation is processed, it cannot be reversed, and if you think there is any possibility you would want to rebook the same property for different dates, it would be worth exploring. I have all the information, I said. I would like to proceed. Okay. Her voice was kind, the way professionals are kind when they understand that something happened and it is not about the house. I will walk you through the cancellation form. It takes about 10 minutes and I will stay on the line with you. It took 12 minutes. At the end, Rosa confirmed that the cancellation was processed, that the partial credit of $14,080 would be returned to my visa within 7 to 10 business days, and that she was sorry it had not worked out for the holidays. Thank you, Rosa, I said. You have been great through this whole thing. Take care of yourself, she said. She meant it in the specific way people mean things when they have read between the lines of a situation and decided to be human about it. I ended the call and sat back in my chair. There is a particular kind of phone call you learn to recognize when you have spent enough time in a family like mine. Not the calls where something has actually happened. Those have a texture to them, a breathlessness or a solemnity depending on what the thing is. I mean the calls where nothing has happened but a position is being established. A call that sounds like a check-in and functions as a staking of ground. Delilah's call that Friday morning was that kind of call. Do not book anything without checking with everyone first. She said it as advice. It was not advice. It was a reminder of the arrangement. The arrangement where I proposed things and the family reserved the right to opt out, and the opt-out was understood to be frictionless and consequence-free, and if I had planned something substantial enough to have consequences, then that was, as my father would later put it, on me. I had heard this arrangement described in different words over the years. It was usually dressed up as concern about overextending, or as a preference for spontaneity, or as a general aversion to feeling obligated. What it actually was, underneath all of that, was the comfort of a family that had discovered they could have the benefit of my planning without any of the reciprocal weight of it, and had simply never examined whether that was a reasonable arrangement for everyone involved. I set the mug down on the table and looked at the cream-colored envelope. Do not book anything without checking with everyone first. I checked my watch. 7:59. In 60 seconds, Rosa would be available. I had the folder open on the table, the booking confirmation laid flat in front of me, the cancellation policy in paragraph 4 already marked with a small pencil line from when I had read it the night before. I knew the numbers. $14,080 back. $21,120 gone. I had done the math 6 times in the night, in the particular way you do math that you have already decided you are going to do, not to reach a conclusion but to sit with it until it feels like the shape of something you can live with. I picked up the phone. 3 years. I want to stay with that number for a moment because my father would later use the word performing, and I want you to understand what 3 years of contributing half my wages to a household actually looked like from the inside. It looked like this. I set my alarm for 5:45 5 days a week so I could do homework before school because I could not do homework after school because after school I was at the grocery store stocking shelves or working the register or doing inventory in the back, depending on which manager was on. It looked like eating lunch in the break room because the break room had a vending machine and I had a 15% employee discount, and 15% of a vending machine bag of chips was still real money when you were tracking every dollar. It looked like not going to the junior prom because the ticket was $45 and the dress would have been another $60, and I did not have $105 to spend on one night when I had a household account to contribute to and a savings account I was also trying to build because I already knew at 17 that I was going to leave. I do not tell you this to be dramatic. I tell you this because when my father said performing generosity, he was describing a version of me that had never existed. A person who gave in order to receive, who calculated the social return on each act of contribution, who kept a ledger and checked it. That person had not worked at the grocery store in Elk Grove. The person who worked there had done it because it needed doing and she was the one who could do it, and that was enough reason. She had not expected to be thanked. She had not, frankly, thought very much about herself at all. She had just done the thing and then done the next thing, and eventually, at 22, she had left. She was still here. Still doing the thing. Still not thinking about herself very much until recently. I thought about the grocery store in Elk Grove one more time before I called Rosa. Not as a grievance. As a data point. I had been 17 and the market had been bad, and I had done the thing that needed doing and contributed for 3 years and no one had said anything about it, and then the market had gotten better and I had left at 22 and we had all moved forward in the way families move forward, without accounting, without inventory, without any formal recognition that something had happened that could not be undone. I was the competent one. The competent one does not require acknowledgement. She has already internalized the lesson that acknowledgement is for other people. I was 34 now. I had been the competent one for 17 years. And I was sitting at my kitchen table on the morning after Thanksgiving with a 40% refund and a $21,000 hole and a cream-colored envelope and a question about what the competent one was going to do next. I had an answer. The booking confirmation was still laid flat on the table. I looked at it, the dates, the address, the amount, the names I had added to the reservation notes. Wade Kane. Corin Kane. Delilah Kane. Colton Guest. Beau Greer. My handwriting, in the notes field I had filled in over the phone with Rosa back in September, when I was still thinking about the look on my father's face when I slid the envelope across the Thanksgiving table and told him it was all taken care of. I picked up the envelope. I opened it and looked at the card inside. For all of us, in my handwriting in blue ink. Then I put it back in the envelope and set it on top of the booking confirmation. My phone had been quiet since Delilah's call. No messages. No check-ins. Nothing from my mother asking how I had spent the holiday. Nothing from Wade following up on the conversation. Nothing from Beau, who I genuinely did not expect anything from, but who might have, who was family enough to occasionally surprise me. I opened my laptop and clicked to the rental company's email confirmation. There it was already, cancellation confirmation, reservation RC 4471, Kane, Presley. I read through it twice. Then I forwarded it to my personal archive folder, the one I kept for financial documents, and I closed the tab. $21,000 gone. $14,000 coming back. The math of what I had just done sat in my chest with a weight that was not quite regret and was not quite relief. It was something more specific than either, something that lives in the space between a decision and its consequences, when you have done the thing but the world has not caught up to it yet. I picked up my phone to set it face down, and that is when I saw the notification. Not a call. A text. From Wade, sent 11 minutes ago while I had been on the phone with Rosa. I had missed it because my ringer was off. Presley. I know yesterday was a surprise. We should talk. Call me when you have a minute. I read it once. I read it again. And then the subject had moved on, the way subjects do at family dinners, and I had not raised it again until I had mentioned it to Delilah in September, and she had said something like, yeah, could be fun, and I had taken that as sufficient enthusiasm to keep going. What I was looking at now, in the new browser tab I had opened, was the calendar. December 26th through the 30th. 4 nights. The dates I had booked the house for. Colton's family in Phoenix, Delilah had said this morning. Christmas week. I pulled up the search on flights from Sacramento to Phoenix. December 24th through January 2nd, round trip. I was not sure what I was looking for exactly. Just the shape of something, the outline of a timing question I could not quite make out yet. The results loaded. I looked at them. Then I looked at the date Delilah had told me she was going to Phoenix, Christmas week, which was exactly the same week as the Tahoe trip, which was the week I had been planning for 9 months. I sat with that for a moment. It was possibly nothing. Phoenix at Christmas was a common destination. Colton had family there, she had said so, and I had no reason to disbelieve it. But Delilah had known in September that I was planning something for the holidays. I had told her directly. And she had said could be fun instead of actually we might be in Phoenix that week, which was either because she had not made those plans yet in September, or because she had made them and had not mentioned it, or because the plans had been made after September and no one had thought to tell me. There was a third possibility, the one I did not want to stay with too long. That the plans had been made recently, triggered not by Colton's family calendar but by something else. By my father's call the night before. By a family conversation I had not been part of, in which the Tahoe trip might have been mentioned. By the particular velocity of a family deciding together how to handle something they had collectively agreed to sidestep. I did not know. I could not know. And the not knowing was its own specific feeling, distinct from the hurt of the Thanksgiving call, more clinical, the feeling of a person reviewing available data and finding the picture deliberately blurred. My phone lit up on the table. Not a call. A second text from Wade. Also, your mother wanted me to mention that Delilah and Colton are talking about doing something nice for the holidays. A trip somewhere. She thought maybe we could all join them. Just something to think about. I read it. I read it again. Then I set the phone face down very carefully and looked at the cancellation confirmation still open on my laptop screen. I did not respond to Wade's text that day. We should talk. My father, who had called me the day before Thanksgiving to tell me not to come, who had delivered this information with the flatness he used for documentation, who had said family should be together while assembling the family in a location that did not include me. He wanted to talk. Now. The day after. I set the phone face down on the table. Not because I did not have things to say. Because the conversation he thought we were about to have was going to be very different from the one that was actually coming, and I wanted to understand the difference clearly before I said a word. Here is what Wade did not know. He did not know about the Tahoe booking. He did not know I had paid $35,000 for a house on the lake with his name in the reservation notes. He did not know about the envelope on my table, or the card inside it, or the 9 months of planning that had preceded the phone call he had made yesterday. And he did not know that as of 12 minutes ago, none of it existed anymore. I had questions about the timing of his text. 11 minutes ago meant he had sent it while I was on the phone canceling a trip he did not know he had been invited on. That was a coincidence. It had to be. There was no way he could know. Unless. I picked the phone back up. Went to Delilah's contact. Read her text history, nothing unusual, nothing since her call this morning. Went to my mother's contact. Nothing since a brief exchange 2 weeks ago about a recipe she had asked me for and never followed up on. I went to Beau's contact. Nothing since a text he had sent in early October about a football game, asking if I was watching, which I had not been. I went back to Wade's message. I know yesterday was a surprise. The word surprise was interesting. Not I know yesterday was hard or I know yesterday was not ideal. Surprise. As if the question of whether I had been hurt was less important than the fact that I had not anticipated the plan. As if what needed to be addressed was my failure to predict, rather than his decision to exclude. I put the phone down again and looked at the cancellation confirmation on my laptop screen. Then I opened a new tab and navigated to the airline booking site. Because there was something I needed to check, something I had been half aware of since the day before and had not yet looked at directly. For months ago in July, I had floated the idea of a family trip at a dinner at my parents' house in Elk Grove. Not the Tahoe trip specifically, I had not found the property yet, just the concept. A holiday rental, all of us together, something nicer than a hotel. My treat, I had said. I wanted to do something big this year. Wade had said, we will see. Depends on timing. Corinne had said, that sounds nice. Delilah had said, if you are paying, I am not arguing. Not because I did not know what to say, I knew exactly what I wanted to say, which was precisely why I did not say it yet. There is a difference between having the words and having the right moment for them, and I had learned over 34 years of being Wade Kane's daughter, that the right moment was never the one he chose. He chose moments for his convenience. I was starting to understand that I could choose them for mine. I spent the rest of Friday doing ordinary things. I portioned the leftover turkey into containers and labeled them. I cleaned the bathroom, which I had not cleaned since before I started cooking for the holiday. I went for a walk around the park in the thin November afternoon and came back with cold hands and a clearer head. The park in late November had that particular stripped quality. The liquid amber trees mostly bare, the paths quieter than usual, the light flat and even, nobody's idea of beauty but real and present and sufficient. I walked the perimeter twice, which was something I did when I needed to think without the appearance of thinking. On the second loop, I pulled out my phone and looked up the property appraiser's website for El Dorado County. I am getting ahead of myself. But the walk is where I started to understand what the next 2 weeks were going to need to look like, and why. I did not open the rental confirmation again that afternoon. I did not look at the flight search I had left open in the browser tab, the Sacramento to Phoenix results that sat on my screen like a question I had asked and not yet answered. I made soup from the turkey carcass and ate it standing at the counter and went to bed at 10 o'clock and slept better than I had the night before. Saturday morning I texted Wade, I am around tomorrow if you want to talk. Nothing more than that. He replied within 4 minutes, come to the house. Noon. I said, okay. That exchange, 9 words between us, completed inside 5 minutes, told me something important about where he thought things stood. He had not asked what I wanted to discuss. He had not offered to come to me or suggested a neutral location. He had named his house and a time, and I had said okay, and in his model of events this was how conversations in our family were arranged. He determined the terms, I agreed, we both behaved as if that were natural. It had been natural for a long time. I was starting to examine the naturalness. Sunday I drove to Elk Grove. The house in Elk Grove was a 4-bedroom on a quiet street with a 2-car garage and a backyard Wade had put a gas grill in 10 years ago and used approximately twice. I had grown up there from age 9 onward, after we had moved from the smaller place in Rancho Cordova. I knew every sound it made. The way the front door dragged slightly on the frame, the particular click of the heating system engaging, the step on the staircase that had been loose since 2009 and which Wade had never fixed because fixing it would have required acknowledging it was broken. I knew the smell of it, which was coffee and that specific brand of fabric softener my mother had bought for 30 years, and which I associated with both comfort and the particular quality of sadness that lives inside familiar things. I parked in the driveway behind Wade's truck and sat in the car for a moment. The street was quiet. A neighbor was raking leaves 2 houses down, the dry scraping sound carrying in the cold air. I watched him for a moment, then picked up my bag and got out. My mother answered the door. Corinne Kane was 58, soft-spoken in the way people are soft-spoken when they have spent decades conserving energy, and she had a face that had always reminded me of a weather forecast. You could read what was coming if you knew what the signs meant. Today her face said, "Your father has already been talking about this for 2 days and I am tired of it." Presley. She hugged me, brief and warm. "Come in. Wade is in the kitchen." "Hi, Mom," I said. "How was Modesto?" "Fine," she said. "Patricia made too much food. You know how she is." She said it in the tone she used for Patricia, which was fond but also slightly worn, the tone of a woman who loves her sister and also finds her sister exhausting and has been negotiating this combination for 50 years. I followed her through the hall into the kitchen, which smelled like the coffee maker had been running all morning. Wade was at the kitchen table with a mug and his reading glasses pushed up on his head, which meant he had been doing something on his phone that required close attention and had stopped when he heard the door. He was a tall man, my father, broad-shouldered in the way men get when they have been athletic in their youth and have settled into a larger version of that frame. Gray at the temples now, more salt than pepper in his hair. He looked like someone who was used to being the most prepared person in the room. "Presley," he said. "Sit down." I sat. My mother poured me a coffee without asking and set it in front of me and then positioned herself at the counter by the sink, which was where she went when she wanted to be present without being part of what was happening. I knew that position well. It was the position she had taken at every difficult conversation in this kitchen for as long as I could remember. My father's voice carrying the exchange, my mother at the counter, watching the window or her hands or some middle distance that was neither. "I wanted to talk about Thanksgiving," Wade said. "Okay," I said. I know the way I handled the call was abrupt. He said it with the tone of someone reciting an acknowledgement rather than feeling one, the specific cadence of a person who has decided to offer a managed concession in order to control what comes next. "It was last minute. I should have given you more notice." "More notice would have been good," I said. "Your mother wanted to see Patricia. It was important to her." I looked at my mother. She was looking at the window above the sink. I looked back at Wade. "I understand," I said. He studied me for a moment. He had a way of looking at people like he was calculating the difference between what they were saying and what they were actually doing, which was a useful skill in commercial real estate and a complicated one in a family kitchen. "You are not upset," he said. I did not say that. "You seem," he paused, searching for the word. "Settled." "I have had a couple of days," I said. He nodded slowly. Then he picked up his mug and set it down again without drinking from it. "I also wanted to talk about this trip you have been planning. For the holidays." My hands were around my own mug. I did not move them. "What about it?" I said. "Delilah mentioned you have been working on something." "A rental," she said. "Somewhere nice." He said somewhere nice the way he said most things involving money, with a slight elevation of tone that could mean appreciation or skepticism depending on the sentence around it. "She and Colton are thinking about a trip of their own. Phoenix, to see his family." I mentioned to her that maybe the two things could align. That maybe if you were doing something for Christmas week the rest of us could join. I looked at him. "Delilah and Colton are going to Phoenix Christmas week," I said. "Well, if you had something planned that week, maybe they would adjust. You would like me to plan a trip for the week Delilah has already made other plans and ask her to change those plans to join my trip. I am not saying, look, Presley, I am saying maybe there is a way to coordinate. Your mother and I could join. Beau would come. If you were doing something nice, something with space, we would all be part of it." I was quiet for a moment. I did not fill the silence. "You have not asked me what I was planning," I said finally. "You have assumed I was planning something and you are telling me how the plan should work." Wade's jaw moved slightly. Not a clench, more like the movement of a man who is resettling his position. I am trying to have a conversation about the holidays. So am I said. From the counter, my mother said quietly, Wade. Just the one word which meant, be careful. He did not look at her. What are you planning then? He asked. What is the trip? I am still working it out, I said, and the words were technically true and cost me nothing to say. They were true in the way many things are true after a decision has been made. The decision had been made, the thing that had been planned no longer existed, but no new plan had yet formed, and in that gap the words were accurate. He looked at me for a long moment. Then something in his face shifted, the calculated look giving way to something more direct, which with Wade usually meant something less managed was coming. I want to say something to you, he said. And I want you to hear it in the spirit it is meant. Okay, I said. You have a tendency, Presley, and you have had it since you were a kid, of doing things in a way that makes everyone else feel like they owe you something. The hosting, the cooking, the planning. He said the last word with a particular emphasis, not theatrical exactly but pointed. Like the word itself was a category of behavior he had been meaning to address. You take things on, and then when they do not go exactly the way you envisioned, there is this atmosphere. Like we have all done something wrong. I looked at him. My voice stayed steady. I see, I said. I am not criticizing you. I am telling you how it comes across. How does it come across? Like you want credit, he said. For things nobody asked you to do. The kitchen was very quiet. My mother was looking at the window. Outside, the neighbor's leaf rake sound had stopped. I picked up my coffee mug and set it down again. A small, even movement. Nobody asked me to host Thanksgiving for 4 years, I said. No, he agreed. Nobody asked me to cook for 6 people every November. To coordinate everyone's schedules, to handle the dietary preferences, to set a real table with iron napkins and fresh rosemary in the brine. Presley. Nobody asked me, I said. You are right about that. That is my point, he said. I know, I said. I understand your point. He seemed slightly wrong-footed by this, by the absence of argument where he had built a structure for one. He picked up his mug. I just think it would be better for everyone if things were more collaborative. If you checked in before you committed to something big. Talked to the family before you decided you were going to plan everything and expected everyone to show up. Like checking in before deciding to go to Modesto? I said. My voice was mild. I asked it the way you ask a genuine question. His eyes sharpened. That was different, he said. How? Because that was your mother wanting to see her sister. That was family. And 4 years of Thanksgiving dinners in my apartment. Were lovely, my mother said from the counter, quickly, quietly. They were lovely, Presley. I want to be precise about what the kitchen confrontation cost me and what it did not. It did not make me angry in the way I think my father expected me to become angry. The defensive anger that would have let him reframe the conversation as an argument, which he was good at, better than I was, 30 years of real estate negotiation having given him a particular fluency in the art of making the other person's position seem unreasonable. I had watched him do it enough times to know the moves. The way he would let you state your case and then find the one word in it that could be made to sound excessive and build from there. Performing generosity was that kind of phrase. It was not a description of anything I had actually done. It was a reframing, the same way a prosecutor takes a fact and turns it slightly until the light catches it differently. I had hosted Thanksgiving 4 times. That was a fact. In his reframing, hosting Thanksgiving 4 times was a performance, which implied an audience, which implied a desire for credit, which implied a transactional quality he was now generously pointing out to me. The money I had spent on groceries and napkins and fresh rosemary became, in this reframing, not a gift but a debt I was manufacturing in other people without their consent. I sat with this on the drive home from Elk Grove. I sat with it for several days. Not because I was unsure of what had happened, I was quite sure of what had happened, but because I wanted to understand it completely before I responded to it. My father was not a stupid man. He was not a cruel one, not in the way that implies malice. He was a man who had spent 61 years in an arrangement where his convenience was treated as a neutral fact, and this had produced, without his awareness, a complete map of the world in which that convenience was always already justified. The map was consistent and internally coherent. It was just wrong about one or two fundamental things. I needed him to see the map. Not for my sake exactly. I was 34 years old, and I had lived in Sacramento for 6 years, and I had a kitchen with afternoon light, and a rosemary plant on the balcony, and a fireproof box in my closet with a document in it worth $2.3 million, and I did not need my father's acknowledgement in the way I might have needed it at 25 or 22 or 17. I needed it for the shape of the next 30 years. For the question of what kind of family we were going to be, if we were going to continue to be a family. That question deserved a real answer, and the only way to get a real answer was to make sure he was looking at the actual picture and not the one he had been carrying in his head. My mother had said they were lovely. They were lovely, Presley. She had said it quickly, from the counter, the way she said things that she meant but that she knew were being said in the wrong moment. Too soft, too late, the right words in the wrong register. It was the most she had said during the entire confrontation in the kitchen. She had been at the counter the whole time, positioned slightly outside the conversation, watching the window or her hands, and I had understood why. My mother at the sink counter was my mother in neutral, present but not choosing, available but not committed. It was where she had spent a significant portion of her married life. I was not angry at my mother. I want to be specific about this. Anger at my mother would have required a different understanding of her than I had. I understood that she moved in the space that my father's certainty allowed, that his confidence about how things were had filled the room for 30 years, and that you did not simply step outside that kind of room by willing it. She was a woman who had learned to keep her opinions close, and she had kept them close for so long that I think she sometimes did not know what they were until a moment like this one showed her. They were lovely, Presley. She had meant it. I could hear that she meant it. And the meaning was its own kind of record. The thing that got said when she was too tired or too present to manage what she said, when the feeling slipped out before the management could happen. It was enough. For now it was enough. Wade made a gesture with his hand, a slight, dismissive movement, palm down, like he was smoothing something on the table. I am not saying they were not appreciated. I am saying the dynamic, the way you position yourself as the one who does everything, who sacrifices, who goes the extra mile and then acts surprised when people do not respond exactly the way you hoped. It creates pressure. It puts people in a position of feeling like they owe you. I let him finish. The clock on the wall ticked twice, audibly, before I said anything. I have never asked anyone in this family for anything, I said. I know you think that, he said. And then, leaning forward slightly, in the voice he used when he believed he was delivering a truth someone needed to hear. The fact is, Presley, nobody appointed you the one who holds this family together. That is a role you gave yourself. And then you are surprised when we do not all organize our lives around it. I looked at him steadily. Is that what you think? I said. I think you do a lot, he said, and you want a lot in return for it. And when you do not get it, you go quiet in a way that makes everyone in the room feel like they have done something wrong. He picked up his coffee. That is not fair to the rest of us. My mother had turned from the window. She was looking at her hands now, which she had folded on the edge of the counter. I thought about the envelope on my kitchen table. The card inside it. For all of us. I thought about the $35,200 I had moved from my savings account in 2 payments, the first in September and the second in October, to a rental company's account for a house on Lake Tahoe's North Shore with a wraparound deck and 6 bedrooms and my father's name in the reservation notes. I thought about Rose's voice on the phone on Friday morning, professionally kind, confirming the cancellation. So your position, I said, is that I contribute too much and expect too much in return, and the solution is for me to do less and want less. The solution is to be realistic, Wade said. About what this family is. About what we can give each other. Stop performing generosity and then keeping score. Performing generosity. I want to make sure I have that right, I said. My voice was even. I recapped an imaginary pen. My hand closed and opened on the table, a small movement. Is that what you said? Performing generosity? Presley. I am not arguing. I want to understand what you mean. Wade set his mug down. I mean that sometimes when you do things for people, it feels like a transaction. Like there is an invoice coming. And we are all tired of waiting for the invoice. The kitchen was very still. Have I ever asked anyone in this family for money? I said. That is not. For reimbursement for any of the 4 Thanksgiving dinners. For contributions. For anything. No, he said. But? For gas money. For the grocery receipts. For any of it. Presley, that is not the point I am making. What is the point? I said. My voice was quiet. Not hard, quiet. There is a difference. He looked at me across the kitchen table. My father, 61 years old, sitting in the house he had bought when I was 9, with his reading glasses pushed up on his head and his coffee going cold in front of him. And what I saw in his face then was not cruelty, exactly, it was not cartoonish enough for that. It was something more ordinary and in some ways worse, the absolute confidence of a man who had never once had to account for the math. The point, he said, is that you do not have anything to cancel. Whatever you think you were planning, it is not your job to plan things for this family. Nobody asked you to. Nobody needs you to. And if you have gone and made commitments somewhere based on the assumption that everyone was going to rearrange their lives around your vision, then that is on you. He said it with the finality of a door closing. You do not have anything to cancel. Nobody asked you to. That is on you. I looked at him. My mother had gone very still at the counter. And Wade, watching me with the expression of a man who had said his piece and considered the matter settled, picked up his coffee mug and said, with the flat certainty of someone who had been deciding things for other people for 30 years, "You never had anything to cancel in the first place." I looked at my father for a moment. The clock on the wall ticked. My mother's hands were still folded on the counter's edge, and she was looking at them with the focused attention of someone who has decided that the floor of a room is the safest place to put your eyes. "Okay," I said. Wade blinked. He had been braced for something. Argument, tears, the particular wounded silence I think he had been expecting since Thursday's phone call, the kind that confirms for the person who caused it that they have landed a blow. What I gave him instead was a single word with nothing attached to it, and I watched him recalibrate in real time, the slight adjustment of a man whose prepared response no longer had a target. "Okay," he repeated. Not a question exactly. More like he was testing the word to see what it weighed. "I should get going," I said. I pushed my chair back from the table. The legs made a soft sound on the tile. "I have things to take care of this afternoon." "Presley," my mother started. "I am glad we talked," I said. I picked up my bag from the floor beside the chair. I looked at my father, who was sitting very still now, the coffee mug in front of him and his reading glasses pushed up on his head, and the expression of a man who had expected a longer fight and was not sure what it meant that he was not getting one. "Thank you for the coffee, Mom." I walked to the front door. My mother followed me into the hall, and when I turned to hug her, she held on for a half-second longer than usual, which told me what she thought of the conversation without her having to say it. "Drive safe," she said. "It is cold out." "I will," I said. I drove back to Sacramento with both hands on the wheel and the radio off, and I spent the 40-minute drive thinking very carefully about the next 2 weeks. I thought about what my father had said and what he believed he was doing when he said it. I thought about the specific architecture of his position, the way performing generosity framed $35,000 and 4 Thanksgivings and 3 years of grocery store wages as a kind of aggression, a manipulation, a way of putting people in debt without their consent. I turned this over on the highway through Elk Grove, through the stretch where the suburbs gave way to open land and the Sacramento Valley spread out flat in every direction, and I thought, he genuinely believes this. That was the part that required the most careful handling. Not the cruelty, I had been around his version of cruelty long enough to navigate it. The belief. The complete internal coherence of a man who had never been required to examine the account. There are things I had not told my family. Things beyond the Tahoe trip, beyond the $35,000, beyond the envelope with the card inside it. Larger things. Things that had been accumulating for 2 years in the same way that money accumulates when you are careful. Quietly, incrementally, in amounts that do not draw attention until you add them up. I need to go back 18 months. A Tuesday in May. I drove to a law office on L Street in downtown Sacramento, a street I knew well, 3 blocks from a coffee shop I went to on the mornings I needed to think outside the apartment, the particular Sacramento downtown smell of coffee and exhaust, and the river in the distance. I parked in a structure and walked half a block and took the elevator to the 4th floor and sat across from a woman named Harriet Osei, who was an estate attorney and who had been the attorney for my grandmother Magnolia Kane for the last 11 years of her life. Magnolia had died the previous February at 83 in a care facility in Folsom where she had spent her last 2 years. She had had a long decline. Nothing dramatic, just the slow recession of a person pulling back from the world, her world getting smaller by degrees until it was a room with a window and a television and the visits she received. I visited every 2 weeks. I drove out to Folsom on Sunday afternoons and sat with her for 2 hours, and sometimes we talked, and sometimes I just sat with her while she watched the birds at the feeder outside the window, and I brought her the things she asked for: crossword puzzle books, a specific brand of lemon drop candy she had liked since the 1970s, and once, memorably, a cutting from the rosemary plant on my balcony because she said she liked the smell of it when she could not sleep. The next Sunday I had found the cutting in a small glass of water on her windowsill, alive, the new growth starting at the tip. Wade visited 4 times in 2 years. Delilah visited twice. My mother went more often than either of them. Once a month, roughly, sometimes more, and I do not want to be ungenerous about that. Corinne went. But Corinne also had a way of making the visits about the difficulty of the drive or the difficulty of watching Magnolia decline, which turned them into a different kind of thing than they were when it was just me and my grandmother and the bird feeder. Magnolia knew the difference. She did not say so directly. She was not that kind of person. She was from a generation that expressed things sideways rather than straight, but she said it in the way she talked about my visits versus the other visits. Mine were visits. The others were when people came by. In Harriet's office, with the rubber tree plant in the corner and the window looking out over a parking structure and the afternoon sounds of L Street coming through the glass, Harriet pushed a folder across the desk toward me. I reached across and picked up the folder. I opened it. Inside was a document I had not seen before. Not the will. I had seen the will, or what I had been told was the complete will, at the reading the previous spring, the one Wade had attended and which had distributed Magnolia's estate in what had been described as equal shares among her son and her grandchildren. That document I knew. This was a different document. It was 6 pages, and the header read Amendment TO Revocable Living Trust, Magnolia Ruth Kane, executed December 14th. December 14th of the year before she died. I unfolded it slowly. It had been trifolded, the creases sharp, the paper the heavy kind that legal documents use, the kind that feels permanent. I laid it flat on the desk between me and Harriet and read the first paragraph, and then the second, and then I looked up at Harriet. She amended the trust, I said. 4 months before she passed, Harriet said. She was very clear about what she wanted. She had been thinking about it for some time, she told me. She wanted it held until, her words were until Presley is ready to use it, not just ready to know about it. She was specific about that distinction. I looked back at the document. Magnolia had owned a piece of land. Not the house in Folsom that had been sold years before to fund the care facility, but a separate parcel, 12 acres in the Sierra Nevada foothills, 40 minutes east of Sacramento, that had belonged to her family before it belonged to her, and which she had been paying taxes on for 30 years. It was land that did not come up at family dinners. It was land that, as far as I knew, Wade was aware of in the vague way children are aware of their parents' assets. As a fact without consequence, a line in an accounting that did not yet require attention. Magnolia had amended her trust to transfer the land to me. Solely and completely, with a provision that it could not be contested within a period of 5 years from the date of amendment, without triggering an automatic execution of a secondary provision she had built in with Harriet's guidance. The secondary provision was a separate letter, notarized, describing the precise nature and frequency of visits made by each family member in the last 2 years of her life. I had understood immediately what the secondary provision was for. It was not a weapon. Magnolia did not think in those terms. It was documentation. It was a woman who had watched her family closely for 83 years saying, "If someone wants to argue about this, here is the record. Here is what happened. Count it if you want to count it." I had left Harriet's office that Tuesday in May with a copy of the amendment and the secondary letter in a manila envelope, which I had taken home and placed in the fireproof box I kept in my closet alongside my passport and my lease and my financial records. I had not told anyone. Not because I was planning something, I was not then. But because Magnolia had said when she is ready to use it, not just know about it, and I had wanted to understand what ready meant before I made any decisions. In August, I had called a property appraiser in El Dorado County and arranged for an appraisal of the 12 acres. The appraiser was a brisk, efficient woman named Carol who had walked the parcel with me on a warm August morning, the dry California hills gold around us, the Sierra foothills rising in the east, and had given me her assessment 2 weeks later in a 3-page report. $2.3 million, given the parcel size, the foothills location, and the current market for undeveloped land within commuting distance of the Sacramento metro. In October, a developer had called Harriet's office. A preliminary inquiry, the kind that gets made when someone with land receives an unsolicited expression of interest. Harriet had taken the call. I had not returned it yet. I understood it now. What ready meant. Sitting in my car outside the house in Elk Grove after my father had told me I did not have anything to cancel, I understood it with a clarity I had not had in May or August or October. Ready did not mean angry. Ready meant knowing what the shape of the conversation was going to be and being prepared for it. Monday morning, 3 days after the conversation in my parents' kitchen, I called Harriet Osei. I need to move forward on the land transfer, I said. And I may need the secondary letter available on short notice. I can have everything ready by Wednesday, she said. Are you expecting a challenge? I am expecting a conversation, I said. I want to be prepared for it to go in either direction. Smart, she said. I will put together the full package. Title transfer, the amendment, the secondary letter, and the visit record. Do you want certified copies or originals? Certified copies for me. Hold the originals. Done, she said. Wednesday by 3. I picked up the documents Wednesday afternoon. I went to Harriet's office on L Street and sat in the same chair across from the same rubber tree plant, and Harriet slid a folder across the desk to me, and I reached in and took out the package. For documents, each in its own labeled section, the amendment on top. I unfolded the amendment again, though I had read it 6 times since May. I lay it flat on the desk and looked at my grandmother's name in the header, Magnolia Ruth Kane, and the date, December 14th. I checked the notary stamp. I checked the signature line where Magnolia had signed in a hand that was shakier than her earlier signature on the original trust document, but unmistakably hers. The M and the C with their particular loops, the way she had written her name for 80 years. Behind the amendment was the title document for the 12 acres. I took it out and laid it flat beside the amendment. Behind that was the secondary letter, 2 pages, single-spaced, in Harriet's formal legal prose but built from the record Magnolia had given her. Dates, names, duration of visits, notes Magnolia had made in a journal she had kept in the drawer of her bedside table, and which she had handed to Harriet at the December appointment and said, "Keep this safe for me." I had not known about the journal until Harriet mentioned it in May. My grandmother had been keeping a record for 2 years. Every visitor, every call, every Sunday afternoon with the crossword books and the lemon drops and the rosemary. She had written it all down in a small blue notebook, the kind with a sewn spine, in the blue ink she had used for everything, and she had given it to the person she trusted to hold it, and that person had held it. I put the documents back in their sections. I put the folder in my bag. "Thank you, Harriet," I said. "She loved you very much," Harriet said. She was very deliberate about this. She did not want it to be a surprise. She wanted it to be a statement. I nodded. I picked up my bag and walked out into the gray December afternoon. I sat in my car in the parking structure on L Street after I left Harriet's office and looked at the folder in my bag. I had driven there on a gray Wednesday afternoon, the kind of December afternoon in Sacramento where the light never quite arrives. Overcast and flat, the city muted, the streets moving at the particular tired pace of the week before a holiday. I had sat in the same structure, in a different spot, 18 months earlier after the first visit to Harriet's office. I had sat in my car then too. I remembered it clearly. In May I had sat in the car for 20 minutes without going anywhere, the manila envelope on the passenger seat, the engine off, the parking structure quiet around me. I had been trying to understand what I was holding. Not the legal document, that was clear enough. Harriet had walked me through every provision. I mean the intention behind it. The fact of my grandmother sitting in a care facility in Folsom with a small blue notebook in her bedside drawer and writing down dates and names and durations, and doing this for 2 years, and not saying anything about it to anyone, and eventually handing the notebook to her attorney with instructions about when and how it should be used. Magnolia had known what she was doing. She had been 81 when she started the notebook, 82 when she amended the trust, 83 when she died, and her mind had been sharp until the last 3 months. She had watched her family for decades. She had seen what I saw, and she had seen more than I saw, and she had done something about it in the only way available to her. Deliberately, quietly, with evidence. I thought about her handwriting in the journal. Harriet had shown me a page, just one, to confirm provenance. The same blue ink as the recipe card. The same particular loops on the letters, the downstrokes heavier than the upstrokes. The same deliberate quality, each word placed with the care of a person who understood that words, once written, become a kind of fact. Every Sunday for 2 years I had driven to Folsom with crossword books and lemon drops. I had not known I was being recorded. I had not needed to know. I was there because she was there, and she was my grandmother, and I loved her, and those were sufficient reasons that did not require any other structure around them. But Magnolia had known something I had not quite articulated to myself yet. That in families like ours, the unofficial record and the official record can diverge sharply, and when they do, the unofficial record tends to lose. She had decided to make her version of the record official. She had done it quietly, for months before she died, without telling anyone, and she had trusted Harriet to hold it until the time was right. Until Presley is ready to use it, not just ready to know about it. I understood that now, sitting in the parking structure, the folder in my bag and the December light flat outside the concrete walls. I was ready. I drove home and made dinner and went to bed, and in the morning I called Harriet. On the drive back from Elk Grove the Sunday after the kitchen confrontation, I had passed the exit for Folsom without taking it. I noticed that I noticed this. The exit for Folsom had been a weekly landmark for 2 years. Every Sunday, I had taken it without thinking, the off-ramp as familiar as my own parking space, the route to the care facility known well enough to drive in the dark. I had taken it for the last time in February 8 months ago, the morning after Magnolia died, to collect her things. After that, the exit was just an exit again, the sign just a sign, the Folsom word on a green rectangle with nothing attached to it anymore. Except it still had something attached to it. I did not take the exit, but I felt the pull of it, not grief exactly, or not only grief. More like the muscle memory of a practice. The body's habit of turning towards something it had done for 2 years, encountering the absence, and having to re-register again that the absence was permanent. Magnolia's blue journal was in Harriet's safe. The cutting from my rosemary plant had long since rooted and grown in whatever small way cuttings grow in hospital windows. The lemon drops were gone. The crossword books were gone. What remained was the 12 acres in the foothills and the amendment with her signature and the secondary letter built from her careful record, and in some way that I did not have the right words for yet, this was also a form of presence. Not a substitute for her. Nothing was a substitute for her. But a form of continuation. Her deliberateness continuing to operate in the world after she had left it, doing the thing she had decided it needed to do. I did not take the Folsom exit. I drove on towards Sacramento in the gray December light, the folder in my bag and the appointment with my father 4 days away. I stayed at the table in Harriet's office for a moment. The folder was in front of me. I put my hands flat on the cover and left them there. Magnolia had been 81 when she started the journal. Writing down the name and the date and the duration of every person who came through her door, because she understood that the truth, without a record, has a way of becoming whatever the most confident person in the room says it is. I picked up the folder and put it in my bag. Then I went out into the gray December afternoon. I called my father that evening. Not to tell him about the land yet. To invite him to lunch. Saturday, I said. Somewhere neutral, not his house, not my apartment. I named a restaurant in Midtown Sacramento I knew he liked, the kind of place with white tablecloths and a lunch menu he would approve of, the kind of place where a conversation has a shape and a beginning and a visible end. He said yes without much deliberation, which told me he still believed he knew what kind of conversation it was going to be. He probably thought I had spent the week adjusting to what he had said in the kitchen, and was now ready to have the more collaborative version of the discussion about the holidays. The managed concession had worked in his model of events, and now we were moving into the resolution phase. I let him think that. Saturday I arrived at the restaurant 7 minutes early, which I never do, and I asked for the table in the back corner, which was quieter and had no one adjacent to it, and I ordered a sparkling water and set my bag on the chair beside me. The folder was inside the bag. I had gone over the documents again Friday night at my kitchen table, reading through the secondary letter in particular. The dates, the names, the carefully recorded durations. 2 hours, 90 minutes, 2 hours 15. Page after page of Sunday afternoons in a small, particular handwriting that I recognized the way you recognize something you have loved for a long time. When Wade arrived, he had the relaxed expression of a man who has decided a difficult thing is behind him. "Presley," he said. He sat down. He looked at the menu briefly, set it aside, looked at me. "You look well." "I am," I said. We ordered. We talked about minor things for the first 20 minutes. His work, a deal in Natomas he was cautiously optimistic about, the weather in Sacramento turning properly cold finally, a neighborhood near his office that was going through a rezoning he had opinions about. I was good at this. I had had decades of practice at the neutral surface, at the maintenance conversation, at the particular kind of attentiveness that looks like engagement and is actually patience. I let him talk. I asked the right questions. I watched the room around us. The Saturday lunch crowd, the server who refilled my water twice without being asked, the light coming through the front window at the low December angle it had been maintaining all week. When the entrees arrived, I reached into my bag. I took out the folder. I set it on the table to the side of my plate without opening it. Wade looked at it. His eyes moved from the folder to my face, and something in his expression recalibrated. Not alarm exactly, but the attention of a man who has noticed that the shape of a meeting has shifted. "What is that?" he said. "I want to finish the conversation we started last Sunday," I said. "Before I do, I want to show you something." I opened the folder. I reached in and took out the amendment, unfolded it slowly, and laid it flat on the white tablecloth between us. Wade looked at it. His eyes moved across the header. Amendment TO Revocable Living Trust, Magnolia Ruth Kane, and then to the date, December 14th, and then down the page. His reading glasses were in his breast pocket. He took them out and put them on without looking away from the document. He read for a moment. I watched his face. The first thing to change was the set of his mouth. A slight tightening, the muscles around the jaw making a small involuntary adjustment. Then his eyes went still in the way eyes go still when the information behind them is moving faster than the expression in front of them. "This is," he started. "Magnolia's Trust Amendment," I said. "Executed December 14th. 4 months before she passed. Harriet Osei prepared it and notarized it. The land transfer is complete. It went into effect at the 6-month mark after her death, per the amendment's terms. The 12 acres in the foothills are in my name." He looked up from the document. "I was not told about this." "No," I said. "This should have been disclosed at the estate reading." "Harriet held it per Magnolia's instructions," I said. "The amendment includes a provision allowing for a delayed disclosure at the beneficiary's discretion. I am the beneficiary. I am disclosing it now." His jaw tightened again. The land should have been part of the general estate. "According to the amendment, it was Magnolia's to direct as she chose," I said. "Which she did." He pulled the document slightly toward him, not taking it, just angling it for a better read. I let him look at it. I picked up my water glass and drank from it. 12 acres, he said. 12 acres, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you know what that land is worth?" "I had it appraised in August," I said. The appraiser put it at $2.3 million, given the parcel size and the foothills location. A developer reached out to Harriet in October with a preliminary inquiry. I have not made any decisions about it yet. $2.3 million. I said it the way I would say any number, plainly without theater. Wade took off his reading glasses. He set them on the table. He looked at me with an expression I did not have a name for because I had not seen it on his face before. It was something between recalculation and the first dim edge of understanding. "Why are you telling me this now?" he said. I reached into the folder again. I took out the second document, the secondary letter, 2 pages, single-spaced. I unfolded it. I laid it flat on the table, below the amendment, so both documents were visible between us at the same time. "Because I want you to understand the full picture," I said. "The amendment is one part of it. That is the other." He looked at the second document. His eyes moved down the first page, the dates, the names, the visit records. He was a smart man, my father. He understood what he was reading quickly. The color in his face changed. Not dramatically, he was not a dramatic man. But the undertone shifted from his ordinary working complexion to something slightly less certain of itself. He read to the bottom of the first page. He turned to the second page. He read that too. Then he looked up. "This is a record," he said. "Of who visited her." "Who visited her, how often, and for how long?" I said. "Magnolia kept a journal. She gave it to Harriet in December, at the same appointment where she signed the amendment. Harriet compiled this from the journal." Presley. His voice had a new quality. Not the flat documentary tone, not the managed concession tone, something less composed. Something that had not been arranged in advance. "This is not, you cannot use this to." "I am not using it to do anything," I said. My voice was even. "I am showing you the full picture. You asked me last Sunday what I had to cancel. You said I did not have anything to cancel. You said nobody appointed me the one who holds this family together." I set my water glass down, quietly, without making a sound. "I wanted to make sure you had the complete information." He was looking at the 2 documents on the table between us. The amendment, the secondary letter. White tablecloth, restaurant noise in the middle distance, the December afternoon light coming through the front window at a low angle. $2.3 million, he said. Slowly. Like he was working out what it meant. "That is the appraised value," I said. "And she left it to you." "She did." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, and there was something ragged at the edges of it, something that had not been in his voice in the kitchen last Sunday, something that was working its way from the back of his throat into the room. "You have been sitting on this." "Since May," I said. "You came to my house last Sunday and sat at my kitchen table and listened to me tell you." He stopped. His hand was flat on the table beside the documents. "You let me say all of that." "You had things you wanted to say," I said. "I let you finish." He looked at me. And I looked back at him, steadily, with both documents visible between us on the white tablecloth, and I waited for him to understand the complete shape of where we were. Not just the land, not just the money, not just my grandmother's careful and deliberate record. All of it. The trip he did not know about. The call to Rosa. The 4 years of Thanksgiving dinners. The 3 years of grocery store wages. The Sunday afternoons in Folsom with the crossword books and the lemon drops and the rosemary. The blue journal in the bedside drawer. "You never had anything to cancel," he said. He was repeating his own words. Not as a statement this time, as a man checking whether he had said something he could not now account for. "That is what you told me," I said. He sat with his own words for a long time. The restaurant moved around us. A server refilled my water glass without being asked. The table 2 over had a quiet conversation about something that involved a lot of nodding. The light through the front window tracked its slow December angle across the white tablecloth. Wade did not move. His hand was still flat on the table beside the 2 documents, and he was looking at them the way a person looks at something they are trying to reframe and finding they cannot. I did not help him. He picked up his reading glasses from the table. He put them in his breast pocket. He did not put them on again. $2.3 million, he said. Again. Like the number needed a second pass to become real. "That is the appraised value," I said. "As of August. And a developer has already reached out." "A preliminary inquiry," I said. "Nothing signed. Nothing agreed to. I have not decided anything about the land yet." He nodded slowly, the nod of a man performing consideration while actually doing something else, something interior and less composed. What are you going to do with it? I do not know yet, I said. And this was true. I genuinely did not know. The land had been sitting in my name, in that fireproof box alongside my passport and my lease, for 6 months, and I had not made a single decision about it because Magnolia's instruction had been when she is ready to use it, not just know about it. I thought I was starting to understand what use meant. But I was not there yet. The developer inquiry, Wade said. Do you have their information? I looked at him. I do, I said. It might be worth talking to them. Get a sense of what they would offer. I have a sense, I said. Harriet has been in contact. He nodded again. Another slow, recalibrating nod. And then he said something that confirmed, more clearly than anything he had said in the kitchen last Sunday, the precise nature of what I was dealing with. You know, if you do decide to sell or develop something like that, it makes sense to have people around you who understand real estate, who know how to negotiate these things. I have been doing this for 30 years. He said it with the specific tone he used in professional contexts, the reasonable, experienced voice, the one that sounded like common sense and was also always in his own direction. Family should help each other. I let that sentence land on the table between us. Family should help each other. I picked up my water glass. I set it down. That is interesting, I said. Last Sunday you told me nobody appointed me the one who holds this family together. That I was performing generosity. That I should stop doing things for people who did not ask me to. I paused. Now you are suggesting family should help each other. His jaw moved. Presley. I am not arguing, I said. I just want to note the distance between those two positions. He was quiet. His entree was in front of him, mostly untouched. Mine was gone. I had eaten steadily through the first part of the conversation because I was hungry and because eating was a thing a calm person did. I said some things last Sunday, he said, that I should probably revisit. Probably, I said. I was, he paused, choosing the word with the carefulness of a man who is not accustomed to needing to choose words carefully. I was being harder on you than the situation warranted. You were, I said. The Thanksgiving thing was hurtful, I said. Plain. Level. One of those rare moments where the named thing is the only accurate thing, and accuracy matters more than restraint. Not catastrophic. Not something I will not recover from. But hurtful. He looked at me. And I saw something move across his face that I had not seen there often. Not regret exactly, or not only that, but the more complicated thing that lives underneath regret in people who have been sure of themselves for a long time. The moment of encountering the gap between how they believe they have been and what the record actually shows. I know, he said. Quietly. For Wade, who delivered most information at a controlled volume, quietly was its own register. I want to show you one more thing, I said. I reached into my bag. I took out the cream-colored envelope. The one that had been sitting on my kitchen table since the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, the one with the card inside. I placed it on the table, on top of the amendment and the secondary letter. I did not open it. Wade looked at it. At the envelope, cream-colored, small, with for all of us visible through the slight translucence of the paper where the card inside pressed against it. What is that? He said. Open it, I said. He picked it up. He unfolded the flap, it was not sealed, just tucked, and took out the card. He read it. For all of us. He turned it over. Blank on the back. He looked at me. There was a reservation, I said. A rental house on Lake Tahoe's North Shore. 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a deck facing the water. December 26th through the 30th. I booked it in September. I paid the balance in October. I let him hold the card. $35,200. Your name was in the reservation notes. Yours and Mom's and Delilah's and Colton's and Beau's. I was going to give you that envelope at Thanksgiving dinner. Tell you it was a gift. Fully paid, no contributions needed, just pack your bags. He was very still. I canceled it, I said. The Friday after Thanksgiving. When I spoke to the rental company, I was 29 days out from arrival, so I was in the partial credit window. I recovered 40%. $21,000 is gone. The number sat on the table with everything else. You canceled it, he said. The same morning Delilah called to tell me she and Colton were going to Phoenix Christmas week, I said. The same morning you texted me that Delilah was planning a trip and maybe we could all join her. I watched him understand the sequence. The order of events. His call on Wednesday, we have decided to go to Modesto. Thanksgiving without me. Delilah's call Friday morning, do not book anything without checking with everyone. His text, arriving while I was on the phone with Rosa. Your mother wanted me to mention that Delilah and Colton are talking about doing something for the holidays. You had already canceled it, he said. When I sent that text. I had been on the phone for 11 minutes, I said. The cancellation was processing. He set the card down on top of the envelope. He put both hands flat on the table, on either side of his plate, in the posture of a man who is using physical stillness to manage something that is not still at all. Presley, he said. I did not know. No, I said. If I had known. I know, I said. And I did know. I understood that the Thanksgiving call, in Wade's version of events, had been a minor logistical change, a holiday rerouting, nothing that would have consequences. He had not been calculating. He had just been, as he so often was, assuming that his convenience was a neutral fact and not a choice with costs. That was, in some ways, the entire story. I am not telling you this to make you feel guilty, I said. I am telling you because you sat in your kitchen last Sunday and you told me I was performing generosity. That I was keeping score. That I should stop doing things for people who did not ask me to. I looked at him steadily. And I want you to have the complete picture. The Tahoe trip. The Thanksgiving dinners. The amendment. The visit record. Magnolia's journal. All of it. The complete picture. He looked at the documents on the table. The amendment, the secondary letter, the envelope with the card. You never had anything to cancel, he said. Very quietly. His own words the third time, no longer a verdict, no longer even a recitation. Something else now. The words of a man encountering the specific weight of what he had said and finding it heavier than he had meant it to be. I said that to you. You did, I said. And you had $35,000 in a rental. He paused. And $2.3 million in land. And 4 Thanksgiving dinners, I said. And 3 years of grocery store wages when I was 17. And 2 years of Sunday afternoons in Folsom. I said it without heat. Matter of fact. I am not keeping score. I just want you to understand what the score actually is, if you were going to bring it up. He did not say anything for a long moment. Outside, through the restaurant window, Sacramento was doing its December thing. Gray sky, bare trees on the median, a woman walking a dog in a coat that looked too thin for the weather. Ordinary Saturday afternoon. The world entirely unconcerned with what was happening at a corner table with 2 documents and a cream-colored envelope and a lunch that had gone cold. I owe you an apology, Wade said. He said it the way he did most things, measured, forward-facing, without excessive decoration. But he said it, which was not nothing. My father was not a man who often arrived at this particular sentence, and I understood that the arrival cost him something real. Yes, I said. You do. I am sorry, Presley. I let it land. I did not rush toward it or away from it. I know, I said. We were not fixed. I want to be clear about that because clean resolutions are for people who have not been paying attention. We were not fixed by a Saturday lunch or a pair of documents or the number 2.3 million or even the cream-colored envelope with the card that said for all of us. What we were, by the end of that meal, was something more modest and more durable than fixed. We were in a different conversation than we had been in before. One where certain things that had been unsaid were now said, and certain things that had been invisible were now visible, and the specific and comfortable assumption my father had lived inside for 34 years, that I would absorb and accommodate and plan and provide and not require accounting, had been, permanently and without drama, retired. That was enough. For now it was enough. I gathered the documents from the table. I put the amendment back in the folder, the secondary letter behind it. I picked up the envelope with the card and put it in my bag, because it did not belong on a restaurant table anymore. It belonged somewhere I could look at it when I needed to remember what I had been about to give before I decided to give myself something else instead. Wade watched me put everything away. He was quiet during it, and the quiet was different from the quiet of last Sunday's kitchen. Less managed, less prepared. More like the quiet of someone genuinely sitting with something. "The land," he said as I closed my bag. "Whatever you decide. I am not asking to be involved. I just wanted to say whatever you decide is the right call." "Thank you," I said. "And next Thanksgiving," he said. Then he stopped. "Next Thanksgiving," I said, "we will figure out." He nodded. "Okay." I called my mother from the parking lot. She picked up on the second ring, and I could hear from the ambient sound that she was at home, in the kitchen, probably the same counter where she had stood last Sunday with her hands folded. "How did it go?" she said. She had known about the lunch, though not about what was in the folder. "Fine," I said. "It went fine, Mom." A pause. "He needed to hear it," she said. "I think so too," I said. "Presley." Another pause, the kind she used when she was saying something she had been composing for a while. "I should have called you. On Thanksgiving. I should have called." "Yes," I said. "You should have." "I know," she said. "I am sorry." I stood in the parking lot with the cold December air on my face and thought about Magnolia's recipe card on my backsplash, the one with the rosemary turkey brine, the blue ink fading. I thought about Sunday afternoons in Folsom. The bird feeder. The lemon drops. The cutting from my rosemary plant in the small glass of water on the windowsill. "Come to dinner sometime," I said. "Just you and me." "I will cook." "I would like that," she said. I drove home with the radio on this time, something instrumental and unhurried, the Sacramento streets gray and calm in the early afternoon. I parked in front of the duplex in Land Park and sat in the car for a minute. The park, 3 blocks away, was quiet in the way parks get quiet in December. Emptier, the trees bare, the light flat, but still present. Still itself. I went upstairs. I put the folder in the fireproof box in my closet, next to my passport and my lease and my financial records. I made a cup of tea and stood at the kitchen window and watched the afternoon light do what it does in December, which is thin and low and try its best. Then I called Harriet. "The developer inquiry," I said when she answered. "Let us hear what they have to say. I am not committing to anything. I just want the full picture." "I will set up a call," Harriet said. "You are thinking about it differently than you were in August." "I am thinking about a lot of things differently," I said. "Good," she said. "That is usually when the right decisions happen." I made dinner that night for myself. Nothing elaborate, pasta and the last of the rosemary from the plant on the balcony. I set one place at the table. I used the good napkins. I did not iron them because it was a Tuesday and I was eating alone and the napkins were fine. The phone stayed quiet. No missed calls. Not 70, not 7, not 1. Not yet. After I got home from the restaurant, I sat at my kitchen table for a while before making dinner. I sat with a glass of water and looked at the place where the cream-colored envelope had been for the last 2 months and was no longer. I had put it in my bag at the restaurant. It belonged somewhere I could look at it when I needed to remember what I had been about to give before I decided to give myself something else instead. The envelope was the record of an intention, of the person I had been in August and September and October, making calls to Rosa and writing for all of us on a small card in the blue ink I associated with my grandmother. That person had not been wrong. She had just been working without complete information. I thought about what Harriet had said. She wanted it to be a statement. Magnolia had not been a dramatic person. She had expressed things sideways rather than straight. The trust amendment was not drama. It was clarity, the most direct thing she had ever said to the people she loved, in the only language that could not be reinterpreted or filed differently in the family archive. The language of a document, of blue ink on heavy paper, of a signature that was shakier than her earlier ones but unmistakably hers. She had known what I would need before I knew I would need it. There are 3 things I have come to understand about the way I was raised, and I want to say them plainly before I go. First, being the one who holds things together is not the same as being the one people hold. I spent 34 years confusing these two things, and I am not entirely done confusing them, but I understand the distinction now in a way I did not before Thanksgiving. Second, the record matters. Not because accountability is a weapon, but because clarity is a form of respect for the people who showed up and for the ones who did not, and for the difference between the two. Third, a table set for one with good napkins and fresh rosemary is still a table set for someone who deserved to be there. This story is a work of fiction, inspired by real emotional truths many families carry. If this reminded you of your own family, the cost of being the one who always shows up, tell me where you are watching from, and subscribe for the next one.